to me became this harbinger for, you know, you need counseling all through your marriage experience. And pre is really good so that you don't figure out, you know, 2 or 3 months in what the person's really like and stuff like that. But also I thought there's points in a marriage, you know, we hear what's it, the 7-year itch? Is that
7-year itch.
All right, so you've got the pre-marriage, you've got after you get married, say almost like a year, it's like, okay, we're now reaching the you know, a year in. Probably one could use some counseling. You've got the 7-year itch. I don't know why 7 years is a key number, but it seems to be. You've got kids, pre and post. That to me is a huge change on families.
Yeah.
And then your kids leave home and go to school. That's another big one. Then you've got, not only the kids are gone, you might need to have a little tune-up, but also you've got the fact that you're possibly an empty nester. That's another tune-up. I mean, it just
retirement is another big one.
Oh, retirement, yeah.
Retirement is major.
I thought, what about, then I started thinking about, what about when people start going through career changes? Mm-hmm. Stressors at work? It's like all of these things, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe I need some counseling and things for that. But what about the relationship when I'm bringing that job home and all these things? I thought, oh, you see, this marriage counseling is not just finite benchmarks and posts. Seems to me there are places all over that we need to be thinking about diving in. So I thought you're the person to have a chat to.
And you know what I'm going to say about that, don't you, James, is that I always say that people should have a regular mental health checkup. Just like you go to the dentist twice a year. And I think if you're married or in a long-standing relationship, it would be a really good idea just to maybe have your annual check-in with a therapist, maybe an opportunity just to resolve any kind of conflicts or difficulties or transitions or stress you've been going through, and then go on your way again.
I fired off to you before we started some of the myths for marriage counseling, and I want to dive back into, before we get even in, and I set you off on that path, this whole idea of having, you know, biannually mental health checkups. And I, you know, as soon as I say that word now, mental, because you've spoken about it, I'm kind of going, there's got to be a better word.
There's got to be a better word.
You know, it's well-being checkup. Maybe it's a well-being checkup.
No, I think I put on my Instagram, your beautiful mind checkup or something.
Mind, yeah.
Wonderful mind, beautiful mind, something, but your precious mind, but something. Come and have a checkup on it.
Yeah, we need the word. Maybe the beautiful mind checkup. That's a good idea. You better coin that term. Write it down and trademark it. I think you gotta.
Yeah.
You know, no, literally trademarking, getting the intellectual property of that term. Use it in your Instagram post. Put it up and.
I think I should start. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe beautiful mind. Really, you've got an amazing mind, and people so take it for granted or don't pay attention to it, and. Really, you should honour your mind. It should be something that you treat as precious, and having a checkup on a regular basis every 6 months or once a year, I think is such a good thing, and very important that couples embrace that concept.
So before we even get started on this whole idea of having these beautiful mind checkups, and possibly with, you know, not only should we do it ourselves, but as a couple, what are the stumbling blocks to people actually wanting to take that first step to say, you know what, maybe I need some counseling?
I think that, you know, and it's a difficult, I'm slightly frustrated in 2021 that we're still having to talk about the stigma of mental health. I mean, we can't be living in a society where, you know, we embrace the iPhone, or we can get people on Mars, or all of these amazing things that are happening. And people are still wondering whether or not you can have problems with your mind. I mean, you know, what is going on, people? This is what I'm asking. Why is it still such a stigma? Your mind is just another part of your body. It often runs really well, really efficiently, and sometimes there are some glitches along the way, and there is lots of things now that can help treat those. And people don't have to suffer in silence. And people need to let go of all of these negative words like crazy, mad, insane, weak, weird, strange, abnormal. All of these things are just blur the fact that everybody has a mind and everybody can have glitches.
Yet, we're Zoomed in, we're WhatsApped in, we're emailed in, we're connected more than we've ever been connected before. Yet that connection, and I'm speaking almost purely from my own experience, nobody ever says, sincerely, how are you doing? And they don't just reach out, although I do have one colleague, and I'm not going to name her, who does exactly that. And I remember last week I got a phone call. And it's like, okay, what do you need? I said, I don't need anything. I'm just calling to say hello. Yeah. How are you doing?
Touching base.
And it's like, and I just sat there and I just said, I think I was in tears. And I just said, I can't believe you called. This feels so good. Oh, and we talked a little bit about work and we talked a little about family, and then it was like, oh, thank you for calling.
Yeah.
And that was it. And we did, but it wasn't really a work call. So yeah, we talked a little bit about work, but that wasn't the call. It was just, well, I just want to know how you're doing. And I then said, why'd you call me?
Being suspicious.
It's just like, it's really, are you doing this to everything? And she said, no, he says, well, I called you because A, you're the only person who ever really responds to my emails. Right. B, you're the person who will reach out every now and then and just, let me know how things are going. And you're the only one who ever calls me. And I went, okay. Well, thank you very much for that.
And I think that's really interesting because there's lots of research now showing what's happened during COVID. And so some managers have been really proactive of calling their employees and touching base and doing just that, how are you, in a very genuine way. But I think something like 40 or 42% of employees are saying they haven't heard from anybody from work other than for a work instruction. Yeah. And I think that's really, really isolating. So there you are, stuck at home. You're getting lots of emails about work and targets and the demand to work even harder, but nobody's actually ever asked you, how are you doing? Yeah, and I think, that's how people start to develop. Well, one of the reasons people start to develop mental health problems at work is that you can just feel very disconnected.
And I think one of the things that I've noticed is that walk around culture that we used to have at our workplaces, where you stop in at someone's cubby and you're having lunch and you're hearing about the kids and you're saying, oh man, I'm having some real problem with, calluses on my feet and or whatever, and these random conversations that you could just have, and you learned about each other, and don't have any of those anymore.
You don't have those anymore. People are just now, lots of people communicate just through WhatsApp or through email, or you see people through Zoom. So those kind of exactly those casual encounters that you would have gone.
They're very constructed in Zoom. Anyway, I love Zoom and I love Meet and Google and I mean, look, I love all these things, Microsoft, but they're very constructed meetings. They're not just happening. My background's constructed, the lighting is constructed, the sound is constructed.
And remember, we're animals, basically. And animals, like to be in close proximity to people. That people's body language, eye contact, all of these things are the things that help us feel warmth and connectedness to people. And that's not always possible to pick up over Zoom. So I'm not down on Zoom or Teams or any of those things. They're amazing. Thank goodness we had them.
Thankfully.
But they can create further sense of alienation.
I would have really loved, and it's not too late, although it's getting warm, and I keep thinking of this, and it's like, then the other side is, well, is it my place to suggest some of these things? Should I be doing that? And it's like, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I at my workplace, got a big parking lot. I thought, why aren't we just doing a little bit of a tailgate party? Where, we show up in the parking lot, we've got our physical distancing, etc., but we can just, do some yoga together. Now, it's a little warm now, but do some stretching exercises together. I don't know, just be in the same place without being together. We can keep our masks on, but we can be a little bit closer. Yeah,
actually, that's really a good point, because what we did earlier, or was it this year, or anyway, in the cooler months, Dr. Marie Vivamus, she organised a team picnic.
There you go.
And we sat in the park, we were all socially distanced, and we just spent a couple of hours just catching up with each other, and it was really, really nice. Everybody really enjoyed it. We did have to talk a little bit louder than usual, because we had our 2-metre distance, etc. But it worked, and I think that's just a really nice way of coming together.
I mean, whether we do that or not, when we come back in the next school year, I'm gonna throw it out there, and I'll throw it out there like I throw it out to everyone else. Is, look, I'm gonna be there. I'll make sure we got I'll set up the 2-meter distance. I'll bring my measuring tape and make sure that we got room. But look, I'm going to be there. If you want to come, show up. And if you don't, hey, that's okay.
I think people will show up because I think people need people. And there's something I just want to quickly say about in terms of counselling at the moment. Can I say that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's been on my mind so much.
Go ahead.
I can tell you what am I seeing over and over and over again with my new clients. It's something about being here in the UAE. Yeah. So everybody normally is very happy here. Yeah. But COVID has meant that we haven't been able to travel. And most people here live their life between Dubai or the UAE and wherever they're from, Canada, UK, France, etc. And these countries have been in lockdown. And what's beginning to happen is people are saying, I feel really anxious and I don't know why, and I feel a bit tearful and I can't work out why. This is fine, this is fine, this is fine. Yeah. But actually what they're experiencing is something we call separation anxiety. Yeah, so this is very, very human. And what happens is when we have close attachments to people, our parents, friends, brothers, sisters, cousins, even the society that you're from, the favourite restaurants, etc. you have back in your home country, the parks, the countryside, the culture, all of these things help to form a sense of identity. And when we get separated from these important relationships in important places, people start to develop anxiety symptoms. And most of us have been able to cope because there's, relative to the rest of the world, the UAE has done an amazing job. I think we've managed to live quite a nice life through COVID overall. But with the restrictions on travel, people can't get home. And what I'm hearing over and over again, but I'm worried about my mum, she's 77. She had a fall. My sister's had a baby. I haven't seen her at all during the pregnancy, or my cousin's getting married and I'm not going to be able to attend. A good friend of mine has died and I'm not even able to go back to my home country to pay my respects. And these things are beginning to make people feel really anxious. And I think that's something employers will need to take into consideration.
Do you think they're prepared to?
I think they probably won't understand what's going on, and even the employees won't understand what's going on. And the other things that are happening is each country goes into, there's a spike in the numbers on COVID. So watching the awful situation in Italy, just imagine if you've got Italian employees, how they're coping with that. Yeah. Now we've got India, Pakistan, the UK. All of these things have a psychological impact on people that will be increasing their sense of separation anxiety. Just, oh God, I need to get home. I should be there. Yeah. I need to be closer to my family. I don't know what am I doing here. And normally that's not an issue because people just book a flight and go. Yeah. We've got lots of public holidays, and plus because Dubai is such a nice place, lots of family and friends come to visit. So separation anxiety is much easier to manage. Well, I think in terms of marriages, I'm not sure on the data of this, but maybe there seems to be some indication that COVID has seen an increase in people seeking out separation and divorce.
I haven't seen the numbers, but I was shocked. I was shocked by the U.S. data that 50% of marriages fail. Yeah. 41% of all first marriages fail. I'm going 50% of marriages fail, 41%. Hold on a second. So second and third marriages are failing too? Like, I'm thinking if you fail on your second marriage, that's an indication of something. Like,
second and third marriages have a significantly higher failure rate than first marriages. I think second marriage is something like 65-70% likelihood of not succeeding.
Wow. So. Wow. I mean, okay.
And the other thing to think about is the length of marriage. The duration of marriage has changed. So now the average length of marriage, I think, in the UK is 14 years. And the
14?
14. And the average length of marriage in the US is something like 12 years. So in
12 years of marriage? That's it?
12 years, yeah.
Well, I'm going on 29.
Well done. Congratulations. You obviously got it right. But for the average, it's something like between 12 and 14 years is the average length of a marriage.
Now, from your perspective as a professional who deals in well-being, I like that word a little bit.
Yes, well-being.
Mental
yes.
well-being. Do those couples who engage in, and you notice I stress the word couples,
Yeah.
because it's not just one person, which to me it becomes puzzling, because I've talked to people and who are engaged in counseling, and there's more than once I've talked to people who it's, well, you know, he thinks I need to get counseling, we're going for counseling because he thinks we need it, or she thinks we need it. And it's like, and I'm looking at them going, you don't think you guys need it? I'm thinking it's a two-way street here, you know. And well, what are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, but you know, honestly,
Yeah.
it takes two. I mean, this is classic conflict resolution theory here. It's two people. So back to the question, after I rambled on there, I was like, you've totally lost track. I see it in your face. I was like, what are you talking
I'm listening. I'm just processing it. I was actually agreeing with you. Yeah.
But so we've got staggering, shocking numbers of marriages fail, which it's just crazy. Do those numbers change quite a bit if the couples go in and start having a conversation to figure out, okay, well, why are we having problems? Why are we not getting along? Does it change or not really?
Well, there's lots of complicated reasons, and I'll get on my soapbox. I think I suppose the biggest change from a marital research point of view, the reasons people now get married are very different to why they got married 100 years ago or so. So now, you know, this idea of romantic love has taken off around the world, and people marry for romantic reasons because they meet somebody, they fall head over heels usually, there's a very strong attraction, and they think that is enough to guarantee a lifetime of happiness together. But then strangely what happens...
That's the media. The media's created this.
The media's created it. And it's part of the belief system, it's in literature, it's in poetry, it's in film. Yeah. And people really do believe that will last forever. But sooner or later, usually a couple of years into a relationship, people are faced with the reality of what it means to be with somebody for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. And then they also get introduced to the real person.
So you can't hide the reality forever.
You can't hide the reality forever. And there's a certain amount of kind of hormones that happen when we're falling in love with people that help us to sort of miss the small print, if you like.
Well, this is what Jenna, this is exactly, I mean, it's not the same, but different. Yeah. This is what Jenna was talking about when last time we podcast with her, and she was talking about how, quite frankly, I kind of forgot about all the things that happen when you give birth because of the hormones.
There you go.
Same kind of hormone reaction with a relationship. We're head over heels. We're in love. It glosses over the rough things, but those hormones don't go forever.
It's always amazing sometimes when you meet couples, think, gosh, they overlooked that. They knew about that, and now it is a big issue. But when they were so madly in love, it wasn't an issue. They just glossed over it. This has happened, glossed over it. This is an aspect of their character I don't particularly like, but you gloss over it because everything else, you're so intoxicated with hormones and this really amazing feeling that you have with somebody when you're in love, that I think people don't really take a step back and think, are we really compatible?
So this is where we need the pre-nuptial conversations.
You need to have, I think for lots, well, it goes back for me even further. Further is, I think, a big reason that marriage fail is that we need to include in the school curriculum.
It's back to the school curriculum?
Children need to learn about relationships, they need to learn about emotions, they need to learn about boundaries, they need to learn about appropriate behaviour, they need to learn about respect, and all of these things. Young people need help to learn how to have a relationship because most people don't. I think it's quite interesting in the West. There's such a focus on sex education, but no focus at all on relationship education. And I think those two things are, it'd be much healthier to teach people about relationships so that they were better informed, especially when those brains in young people are so malleable and receptive to these ideas. You could really create healthy people ready for relationships.
Well, especially, it makes so much sense. I'm thinking back to my own high school, as you said, sex education was big. And we had this whole health thing, so there was a fitness component, and then there was just general socialization things of being together. You know, we learned square dancing, and which of all things, which, you know, in one breath it's like, what, we learned that? Well, that's cooperation and working with people. Like, okay, I get it, and to this day I can, you know, everybody do-si-do, and you know, I can square dance pretty good.
That's why you've been married 29 years, isn't it? If in doubt, do a square dance.
That's it. Bow to your partner. Bow to the corner too. Oh, shake hands and turn to the left. And okay. Oh man, see, I can even remember it.
So it stayed with you, which is actually important, because if you were taught about relationships, that would also stay with you.
Well, and that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, okay, this is what a perfect place, a perfect environment to be able to talk honestly about relationships and the fact that, hey, you know, they all don't always work, and the original assessment of a relationship might not be the best assessment because, as we say, hormones and what's going on. Teach that in a school setting with someone who's a third party. So, you know, your teachers are not, you know, they're that third party, because I'm going to go home, you know, I'm a 16, 17-year-old, I'm going home and I'm seeing my dysfunctional family, and I'm seeing this, and it's like, okay, maybe it's worked. Maybe I'm living with a single parent. Yeah. Do I talk about this with my single parent? Probably not, because, you know, that's going to potentially bring up a raw spot. Maybe I feel that it's my own faults as being the child, and who's meant that we need a bigger house, or we need to have more money to spend on things. And having this third party back to school to help me understand relationships and help us understand relationships at that age, that we then carry forward. And then when I knock on your door and say, you know, Cheryl, I need to have a chat, and it becomes a more, well, you know, we talked about this when we were much younger. This is a logical check-in. And maybe, as you're talking about with these mental well-being checkups, maybe that's where you start putting that into the thing and start saying, hey, you know what? We need to have those conversations every now and then, and these become a part of your life.
Yeah, we need to start early. People, you know, there's no point people love having these really bright children that can do advanced, you know, arithmetic. But really, what we should be teaching alongside that is how to have healthy relationships. Yeah. And that would include, when we run into difficulties, instead of just trying to battle it out ourselves, that we would go and see somebody and we'd nip the problem in the bud, and we would both have an emotional language so we could understand each other and hear each other when we raise an issue, and then just go off on their merry way and probably continue to be happily married. So most people go into relationships on a false premise of romance, and then they discover they don't really have very good relationship skills. And that combination can create difficulties over time.
So we reach that point where we need to understand that. So really we need to sit down and have a conversation probably before we get married.
Before you get married would be really helpful. The amount of people that would benefit from having premarital counseling, you know, is significant, because sometimes you think when you meet people, it would have been helpful to have addressed this beforehand. So
it doesn't mean they can't be friends, but maybe, you know, a lifelong relationship is not for you.
Well, simple things like finances, for example. You often find people in relationships have different ideas about money, which you're probably not that aware of when you're madly in love with them, or you gloss over it. But when you get married, and if one is a super spender and the other is a super saver, that's going to cause a lot of conflict. I often say people do more due diligence when they're buying a house than they do when they're buying a car. Than they do thinking about getting married. They don't think about what it really means to be committed.
Have you checked out their socials? Have you just had a look around? Have you talked to your friends? What do you think of this person? You know,
it's everything. What are your expectations? There's no point getting married and then all of a sudden your partner doesn't want you to go anywhere without them. Well, did they mention that before you got married? Is that something you agreed to? So there's all sorts of problems that start to come up, because often couples don't seriously think about what it would mean to be married, and sometimes people form these quite strong attachments, and the thought that they may lose this person means that they're willing to, you know, bypass key pieces of information in the hope that they'll just get married and they'll never have to deal with a breakup.
So we would benefit from having pre-marriage counseling. We don't typically. So well, maybe through a church, maybe through another organization, possibly. But I mean, I know people who've gotten married. I know they've gone through those pre-marriage things. I'm not so sure they've all taken it very seriously.
I don't think they do, because mostly pre-marital counselling has been the domain of the church or a mosque or another religious organisation. And, cynically, I think people go because they want to get married in that particular church, and so they go along for their 3 sessions with the vicar, and it's very nice, but they're not taking it very seriously. But I actually think probably a longer period of commitment to pre-counselling before marriage, where you look at very specific areas, would be helpful. So another thing that you often see is people fall in love, and it's a beautiful thing, cross cultures and cross religions. Now, when you're madly in love, you see no obstacle to that. And when you get married, those differences can show up in lots of subtle ways, how people celebrate, how people want to raise their children, what kind of relationship they want to have with their families. And all of these things, unless you really think about them before you get married, can come as quite a big surprise to you. And it's not that you shouldn't get married if you're in a different culture, a different religion, but it's often worth paying attention to what some of those differences would be and how you're going to handle it.
Which is why it makes a great sense to have that third party, so not the people who are going to marry you, but that other party that's a little bit removed. And it seems to me, sorry to interrupt, by the way.
Yeah, that's good.
It seems to me that this pushes us into about a year, 18 months, 2 years in, where all of this stuff is now starting to manifest. Because we haven't had the conversation before. We've been in this aura of, everything's great. We've had our first anniversary, and now it's, okay, this is real. And how many people do you know who've entered into these relationships? They've had the fog of love, and somewhere in there, it's like, I'll be able to change him. I'll be able to change her. Don't worry. I've got this sorted. She's such a great person. She'll come around.
I think that's a big one.
And I'm thinking that's about 18 months in, 18 months to 2 years, probably 2 years is getting close to the point where you're starting to get really frustrated because you're never changing anybody. Like, honestly, you're not changing somebody. Unless they want to be changed, come on, AA tells us all about this. I mean, I know it's got nothing to do with it, but what's the number one credo of Alcoholics Anonymous, AA? Is you can't change someone, they've got to want to enter the program.
Yeah, and you have to be realistic about who you're marrying. So I'm just thinking about something I saw recently. So one person in the relationship was a person of few words. And there was a belief and a hope that with time, the partner would be able to bring this person out of their shell and that they would have many more meaningful conversations.
It's not going to happen. If they're 25 years old and they're in their shell, they're never coming out of that shell.
Well, I think they can come out of their shell, but I think it's about also, this person, clearly wasn't dead. They're full of emotion and they're very much in love with their partner, but from a personality point of view, they're not necessarily that emotive. And so you can't then expect, someone to be effusive and talkative and all of these things if that is the reality of who you've married, for example. So
is that the point then? And I'm just randomly picking this 18 months, 2 years. That to me seems like another point, once the fog wears off, where we need to sit down again, come and see Cheryl, and sit down and say, okay, this is where we're at, and have an honest conversation about those little things at this point that are just, I always liken it to that stone in your shoe when you're jogging. It's, I can jog through it. No, you can't, because by the time you get home, you've got an aching blister because of that thing that's there, and it's just grown out of proportion. And ultimately, that's where we end up with the 50% of marriages getting a divorce. Is that about a 2-year point where we need to sit down and sort these things?
I think it's probably a good point, but I think I'm smiling there because I think there's some marriage research. I'm just trying to think if I can remember who it is. But anyway, I think it might be John Gottman. He said that actually, and he's a very famous...
I was going to say Gottman, that's a name that stands out to me.
Yeah, he's a very famous marital therapist and researcher, and he said, actually, couples only really have about 7 arguments.
Okay.
That's it. And so...
in their entire span of their relationship?
The theme.
Oh, okay, 7 themes of
argument. Your mom doesn't like me. Yes, she does.
Okay.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah.
Why did you leave me on that day before my birthday? You knew how devastated I was. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. So what happens is couples synthesize their relationship, and there's something like 7 points of conflict that they just go around over and over again.
And we keep rehashing them.
They just rehash it. And at the core of everything will be something about one of these 7 issues that is unresolved, and will just show up at any time. If you're arguing about why you left the milk out, it will somehow get back to one of these core arguments. Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't have left the milk out if you hadn't have left me when I needed you the most. Or if your mom was nicer to me when she came to stay, I wouldn't be so forgetful. And on it goes. And I think there probably is some truth in that, is that what happens is couples get into an argument that they can't resolve, and they go round and round and round and rehash it in lots of different ways.
So we really need to sit down with someone who can say, hey, hold on, this is what you're arguing about.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And do you think, is there an expiry date on when we can sort out that thing that we're arguing about that's causing problems for a marriage? If it's something that's been going on, I had this issue with your mother 20 years ago. Now, of course, we're saying statistically marriages don't last that long. Yeah. But let's say it's 10 years ago. Can I solve that 10-year-old issue today?
Yeah, I was thinking, remember, I always am on the side of hope. So people,
you're an optimist.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah, people don't walk in and Cheryl goes, oh, you're done for.
No, I don't. I actually usually don't think that, because usually you can see from a distance what is going on. Yeah. And it's being able to highlight that. And then the challenge is willingness to change.
Do you think people, generally speaking, you sit with a lot of people, are they willing to change? Do they want it?
Well, no, sometimes enemy lines have been drawn and people are not prepared to cross the line. This is my stance, and I'm not prepared. But what you have to have is a willingness to let go of something, to address something, explore it, and try and resolve it in order to move on. And I think, we're only human. And in a couple situations, sometimes people end up locking horns. Right. And that just undermines the happiness.
So do you think when, because I threw the idea out there that, there's the pre-marriage, there's a couple of years, there's another couple of years, there's another couple of years, and they're all milestones in relationships. Do you think the challenges of those milestones, the things that cause couples to have disagreement, where they probably could use talking to someone, do you think we could relate those milestones and the things that people are disagreeing to back to Gottman and these 7 basic arguments that probably get highlighted or increasingly manifest because of the pressure? So, your mom made a comment about me not necessarily being a good father. Now we've got kids. Now my kids have gone away, and I've got an issue with one of the kids. And your mom set me up for this.
Yeah. So just to go back to your original question there is...
Basically, I can now sit back and just let you do a lecture.
No, I'm not going to lecture. I'm just going to say, just to pick up on that, because you've raised a really important point, is that there are often important transitions in people's lives that can create changes and also tension. So becoming parents for the first time, having kids, couples tend to have very familiar arguments. You could meet probably 10 couples, put them in a room and ask them what they argue about with the kids. He doesn't help, she doesn't help, she's too controlling, he's not as interested as he could be. So you have these themes that come up. And then you could go, maybe at another point, both of you doing really well at work, being promoted, but you don't spend very much time with each other anymore. That can be a theme.
Right.
Retirement can be a theme. Oh my God, they're now going to have to spend all of our free time together, and I wasn't prepared for
the number of people who I hear that from, and the number of people who ultimately, I've met so many people that get retired and they get divorced. They're split, and it's like, but what?
Yeah, that's a really common time for people beginning to separate, is in there around the 50s, when the children are starting to leave home. And in that 50s, 60s, people are beginning to let go of work, their identity around being a parent is changing, and then they're back to meeting the person that they married, if they've managed to stay married that long, 25 years ago, and they're wondering what they have in common. And so that, and the idea that you may have to spend every day with this person with nothing like work or the kids to distract you.
Well, I guess you get two groups of people, right? Especially when you become an empty nester. It's either the people who embrace that, it's like, oh, thankfully. We get our, you know, and I felt really guilty. I'll be one of those people. I felt really a little bit guilty because I'm glad my boys are gone. Like, look, I love my boys, don't get me wrong. I can't wait to see them. But I am really glad, and I said to my wife, I said, we get our life back.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, you can't say that. I said, well, but you know what? We don't have to worry about them day to day anymore because I don't know about their day to day unless they call me.
Yeah.
I feel like we are back to where we were before we had kids.
Yes. And look at the smile on your face.
It's so exciting. Well, because you can just go out for dinner and you can go for a walk and you can decide, you know, what are we doing right now? Nothing. Well, let's go.
Yeah.
And let's go do a weekend. I couldn't do that when I got my kids here.
You can't do it, and sometimes the weekends are spoiled because they fight the whole weekend.
Well, yeah, that too.
Or sulk or something like that.
Activities and stuff.
Yeah.
And no, the best one was when you go with kids on the weekend. And it was like, oh, are we done yet?
Yeah.
What are we going to do now? It's like, well, we're going to do nothing. We're going to sit by the pool, we're going to read a book, and we're going to do nothing. Oh, that's boring.
Yeah.
It's like, so, in my case, we got our life back. And fortunately, my wife feels the same way. I mean, I think it took a little bit.
But that's healthy. I think that's considered a healthy adjustment. So it's probably, if you talk to the kids, they're probably happy wherever they are.
Oh, yeah, very happy.
Getting on with their life, and you and your wife are getting on happily with yours. And so that's a success story. That's how it should be. The children go away, and you miss them for a while, but then you readjust and you go, oh, actually, it's really nice. I can spend so much more time with you. This is exciting. We can do whatever we want, and we don't even have to pretend to uphold all these rules anymore. We can we can disobey our own house rules.
At the very start, we talked about going back and back home, or as expatriates, and so with both of my kids who live in different parts of Canada, we're going to see them. Probably not together, unfortunately. But we found places to stay that are very close to where they lived. And both of my boys were very excited about that. We can't stay with them because A, they don't have the room, and quite frankly, do I want to stay with my boys?
No.
Not really. It's like, look, I love them, don't get me wrong. But it's nice. They're adults. They need their space. My time and their time are different times. But the fact that we're going to be like almost next door, both of them said, oh, isn't that going to be awesome? Yeah. Like there was no, oh, really, you're not going to be a little bit farther away, we need a little bit more space.
No, that's really healthy. That is fantastic. Sounds like you've done a great job.
It's hard.
It's hard, yeah.
There's the roller coasters, right? And it's all those things.
Yeah. So I just want to say, not everybody needs marital therapy or premarital therapy. I don't want to make... Well, some governments now are beginning, and I think actually Canada is one of them, where I think they're really going to start investing in having premarital counselling because, and I think Finland is actually, good old Finland that leads the curve on it, leads the way on everything. I think they're going to make it part of the teaching curriculum and a prerequisite before getting married. Okay. Because if happy marriages create happy families, that create happy societies, that create happy people going to work.
Right.
So it's actually really an important part of life that we do need to get right. Yeah. And I think there's a growing awareness that people need help with their marriages. You don't have to be... Often people wait until their marriage is in crisis before they try and speak to somebody. Yeah. But if they just came... when there were a few niggles beginning to build up, you can iron those out quite quickly. Okay. But people just try to deal with it on their own, and they just fight and they argue and they fight and they argue, and things just get worse and worse. So again, it's that thing, let's destigmatize marital counselling. Right. It's all right to come along. You might just need a couple of sessions. Some people might just need one session, but just sort it out. Don't just let it fester.
I like that.